My mom looked me dead in the eye and said, "You were never my favorite." The champagne glass slipped from my fingers, shattering against my mother's pristine hardwood floor as her words hit me like a physical blow. "You were never my favorite." The entire dining room fell silent. 23 family members, aunts, uncles, cousins, my golden child brother Derek, all stared at me with varying degrees of shock and secondhand embarrassment. Mom just stood there, her perfectly applied lipstick curved into that familiar cold smile I'd known for 28 years. 30 seconds earlier, I'd been finishing what I thought was a beautiful toast for her 60th birthday. I talked about her strength, her sacrifices, how she'd inspired me to become the software engineer I am today. I'd even mentioned the promotion I'd just received at Tesla, making me the youngest senior architect in my division. The words had come from my heart, despite everything. "Happy birthday, Mom. Thank you for making me who I am." That's when she'd looked me dead in the eye and delivered her poison. "Oh honey," she continued now, her voice dripping with false sweetness as she surveyed the wreckage of crystal at my feet. "I mean, Derek has always been my pride and joy. You know that, right? He's the doctor, after all." Derek, 31 and still living in Mom's basement despite his medical degree, had the decency to look uncomfortable. At least there was that. Aunt Linda cleared her throat. "Patricia, that's a terrible thing to say." "It's just honesty," Mom interrupted, waving a dismissive hand. "Sarah's always been so difficult. Remember when she was 16 and threw that tantrum about the car? So ungrateful." The car. She was talking about when she promised me Grandma's old Honda for my birthday, then gave it to Derek instead because boys need cars more than girls. I hadn't thrown a tantrum, I cried quietly in my room while she told everyone I was being dramatic. Uncle Mike shifted in his chair. "Patricia, maybe we should." "And the college thing," Mom continued, apparently just getting started. "I mean, yes, she went to Stanford, but I had to take out so many loans. Derek's medical school was much more expensive, of course, but it was a better investment." My chest felt tight. She'd never taken out loans for my education. I'd worked 3 jobs and earned academic scholarships. Meanwhile, she'd happily written checks for Derek's entire medical school tuition, money she'd inherited from Dad after he died when I was 22. Cousin Rachel was recording everything on her phone. "Fantastic." "Mom," I said quietly, my voice barely steady. "Can we talk privately?" "Oh, there's nothing private about it, sweetheart. Everyone here knows Derek's always been special. Remember when Sarah claimed she was valedictorian? Well, technically she tied for it with another student, so it's not like she was actually the best. I hadn't tied. I'd been the sole valedictorian. But she'd been telling people the tie story for so long, I wondered if she actually believed it." The room felt like it was spinning. Grandma Rose, 87 and sharp as ever, was staring at Mom with an expression I'd never seen before. Derek looked like he wanted to crawl under the antique dining table Dad had built by hand. Something inside me snapped. 28 years of this. 28 years of being diminished, undermined, and gaslit while watching Derek get praised for breathing. 28 years of being the family disappointment despite every success I'd achieved. I looked around the room at my relatives, people I'd barely seen because Mom always had excuses for why I couldn't come to gatherings, or why they couldn't visit me in San Francisco. It was time they knew why. I took a deep breath and stepped over the broken glass, moving to where I had a clear view of everyone at the table. "You know what, Mom? You're absolutely right. Let's be honest with everyone." Her smile faltered slightly. Derek shot me a warning look, but I was done protecting her. "Since we're sharing truths tonight, maybe I should tell everyone about the loan you took out in my name 3 years ago. The one for $47,000 that you never mentioned to me." The color drained from her face. "Sarah, don't. The one I only found out about when my credit score tanked and I couldn't get approved for my mortgage." I turned to address my stunned relatives. "See, Mom here has been using my social security number and excellent credit to finance Derek's lifestyle. The basement renovation. That was my credit line. The BMW in the driveway. Also mine, apparently." Uncle Mike leaned forward. "Patricia, is this true?" "It's complicated," Mom stammered, but I wasn't finished. "Oh, it gets better. Aunt Linda, remember when you lent Mom $15,000 last Christmas because she said I'd refused to help with Derek's student loans?" Aunt Linda nodded slowly, her eyes narrowing. "I never refused anything. She never asked me. In fact, I've been sending her $2,000 every month for the past 2 years because she told me Derek was struggling to find work after his residency. Turns out Derek's been making $180,000 a year at Mercy General this entire time." Derek's face went white. "Sarah, I didn't know she was telling people." "Didn't you?" I whirled on him. "Didn't you wonder where the money for your fancy new gaming setup came from? The one that cost more than most people make in a month?" Grandma Rose's voice cut through the chaos like a knife. "Patricia Elizabeth, what is going on here?" Mom's hands were shaking now. "Mother, Sarah's exaggerating. She's always been prone to dramatics." "I have bank statements," I said simply. "Screenshots of text messages. Credit reports. Should I get my laptop from the car?" The silence stretched until Cousin Tom spoke up. "Wait, Patricia, didn't you tell us Sarah was making minimum wage at some startup? You said that's why she couldn't contribute to family gifts anymore." "Minimum wage," I repeated, almost laughing. "I make $240,000 a year. I was lead architect on the software that runs Tesla's charging network. But apparently, I'm the family disappointment who can't hold down a job." Uncle Mike was pulling out his phone. "Patricia, I want that $15,000 back. Tonight. And I want to know about the graduation party," Grandma Rose said, her voice deadly quiet. "You told me Sarah didn't want one because she was embarrassed about her grades." My throat tightened. "I graduated summa cum laude, Grandma. I was accepted to MIT for my master's with a full scholarship. But Mom told me you all thought college had made me too big for my britches and didn't want to celebrate." Grandma Rose stood up, all 4 feet 11 inches of her radiating fury. "Patricia, I have been wondering for 6 years why my granddaughter never visits, never calls. You told me she was too busy with her hippie friends in California. I sent Christmas cards, I said, my voice cracking. Birthday cards. I called your landline dozens of times, but Mom always said you were sleeping or busy. I changed my number in 2019, Grandma Rose said slowly. I gave Patricia the new one to pass along to you and Derek. Derek looked stricken. Grandma, I've been calling you every week. The pieces were clicking into place around the room. I could see it in their faces, the dawning realization of how thoroughly Mom had orchestrated my isolation from our family. But I was just getting started. Actually, let's talk about those weekly calls, Derek, I said, turning to face my brother. The ones where you and Mom plan out these little family stories. Derek's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Sarah, I don't know what you're talking about. Really? So you didn't know that Mom's been telling everyone I was arrested for drunk driving last year? The story where I supposedly crashed into a mailbox and called her crying from jail. Aunt Linda gasped. Patricia said you needed lawyer money. I haven't had so much as a parking ticket in 5 years. I don't even drink, remember the therapy I went to for anxiety? The therapy Mom said was me being attention-seeking. Turns out having panic attacks every time someone raises their voice is pretty normal when you grow up walking on eggshells. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling. But here's my favorite lie. Mom, tell everyone about my boyfriend Marcus. You know, the one you've been calling a deadbeat for 3 years. Mom's face had gone from pale to gray. Sarah, please. Marcus Rodriguez, pediatric surgeon at UCSF. We've been together 4 years, engaged for 8 months. But according to Mom, he's unemployed and I'm supporting his drug habit. I held up my phone, showing our engagement photos. These are from Napa last month. He wanted to come tonight, actually, but Mom told me he wasn't welcome because this is a family celebration. Cousin Rachel lowered her phone. Wait, you're engaged. Patricia, you told us Sarah couldn't keep a relationship because of her issues. What issues? Derek asked quietly. Oh, you know, Mom said desperately, Sarah's always been unstable. Unstable? My voice rose. I've held the same job for 4 years. I own a condo in Palo Alto. I volunteer at a coding boot camp for underprivileged kids every weekend. But sure, I'm unstable. Uncle Mike was scribbling notes on his napkin. Patricia, I'm keeping track of every lie. That's my money you stole with these stories. It wasn't stealing, Mom snapped, finally showing some fight. Family helps family. Sarah should have been contributing more anyway. I was contributing. The words exploded out of me. $2,000 a month to you, plus I paid for Derek's medical licensing fees, his malpractice insurance, and that vacation you two took to Europe last spring. The one where you told me Derek needed recovery time after his residency. Derek stood up abruptly. What vacation? Mom, I haven't taken a vacation in 2 years. The room went dead silent. Mom's mouth worked soundlessly. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Derek, I said slowly, where did you think that money was coming from? The monthly payments for your student loans? I've been paying those myself since I started at Mercy General. Mom said you were helping with your own loans, but mine were my responsibility. I stared at him, then at Mom. She's been taking money from both of us. Grandma Rose sank back into her chair. Patricia, how much money are we talking about? I did quick math in my head. From me? About $68,000 over 2 years. Plus the loans she took in my name, so call it $115 total. And from me, Derek said, his voice hollow, she borrowed $12,000 last year for Sarah's medical bills when you supposedly had appendicitis. I've never had appendicitis. Uncle Mike's pen had stopped moving. Patricia, where's the money? Mom looked around the room like a trapped animal. There were expenses. This house doesn't maintain itself. And Derek's education is paid off, Derek said firmly. Has been for 6 months. Aunt Linda was pulling up her banking app. I want documentation, Patricia. Every penny, or I'm calling the police. You can't call the police on family. Mom shrieked. Watch me, Grandma Rose said, reaching for her purse. Fraud is fraud, Patricia. Even when family does it. That's when I realized we'd moved far beyond public humiliation. This was unraveling into something much bigger, and Mom was about to get very, very desperate. You don't understand, Mom said, backing toward the kitchen doorway. I was protecting this family. Sarah, you have no idea what you've done. Protecting us from what? Derek demanded, but she was already moving. Patricia, sit down, Grandma Rose commanded. We're not finished here. But Mom was in full flight mode now. I heard her heels clicking rapidly across the kitchen tiles, then the sound of drawers being yanked open. My stomach dropped. She's going for the safe, I said, remembering the fireproof box Dad had installed behind the spice rack years ago. Derek, she keeps documents in there. He was already moving, but Mom's voice carried back to us, high and panicked. I have every right to protect my private papers. Uncle Mike stood up. Nobody's leaving until we sort this out, Patricia. Michael, you sanctimonious ass, this is my house. I'd never heard my mother use language like that. Ever. In 28 years, the worst I'd heard was darn when she burned dinner. Crash. Something heavy hit the kitchen floor. Mom. Derek called out. I'm fine. Just, give me a minute. Aunt Linda was whispering furiously to Uncle Tom. Cousin Rachel had her phone out again. Grandma Rose looked like she'd aged 10 years in the past 5 minutes. Sarah, she said quietly, how long has this been going on? The money stuff. I only found out about the credit fraud 2 years ago. But the lies. I sat down heavily in Derek's abandoned chair. Forever, Grandma. She's been rewriting reality my entire life. Why didn't you say anything? Because I thought I was crazy. She's so good at it, making you doubt what you remember, what you experienced. And when I did try to speak up, she'd have some explanation that almost made sense, or she'd cry and talk about how hard things were after Dad died. More crashing from the kitchen, followed by what sounded like papers rustling. Derek reappeared in the doorway, his face grim. She locked herself in the pantry. Says she's not coming out until everyone leaves. The pantry? Uncle Mike looked incredulous. She's hiding in the pantry like a child. Did you see what she was looking for? I asked. Bank statements, I think. And there was a manila folder full of letters. Some looked like they were addressed to you. My blood went cold. Letters to me? From who? I couldn't see. She grabbed them pretty quick when she saw me looking. Grandma Rose was struggling to stand. Derek moved to help her, but she waved him off. I'm going to talk to your mother. Grandma, maybe that's not, I started. Patricia Elizabeth, she called toward the kitchen, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd raised 5 children through the Depression. You get out here right now. Go away, mother. This is all Sarah's fault. She's turned everyone against me. Your daughter just told us you've been stealing from her for years. It's not stealing. She owes me. Do you have any idea what I sacrificed for these kids? Derek and I exchanged glances. Here we go. I gave up my career. Mom's voice was muffled but audible. I could have been somebody, but I stayed home with them. The least Sarah could do is help support the family she destroyed. Destroyed? I called back. Mom, how did I destroy anything? Your father never recovered from your teenage years. All that defiance, the way you questioned everything. You stressed him into an early grave. The room went dead silent. Dad had died of a heart attack at 52, sudden and devastating. I'd always wondered if I could have done something different, been a better daughter somehow. Patricia, Uncle Mike said slowly, Robert died because of a genetic condition. The autopsy showed severe arterial blockage, it was hereditary. You know this. She made his life miserable. Always arguing, always thinking she knew better. Derek moved toward the kitchen. Mom, that's not true. Dad was proud of Sarah. He bragged about her grades constantly. Because I made him. I told him to encourage her. Dad showed me her acceptance letter to Stanford. Derek called toward the pantry. He cried, Mom. Happy tears. He was so excited he called Grandpa Joe at 6 in the morning. From behind the pantry door came a sound I'd never heard my mother make, a low, keening wail that raised the hair on my arms. Something was very wrong here. This wasn't just about money anymore. The wailing stopped abruptly, replaced by frantic rustling sounds. Then Mom's voice, muffled but desperate, Where are they? Where did I put them? Patricia, what are you looking for? Grandma Rose demanded. The letters. The cards. I saved them all. Derek shot me a worried look. Mom, what letters? From Stanford. From her professors. All those people telling me how wonderful Sarah was, how proud I should be. Her laugh was brittle, bordering on hysterical. 28 years of people telling me my daughter was special, and for what? So she could humiliate me in front of my entire family? I felt the blood drain from my face. Mom, what professors? What letters? The pantry door flew open and she emerged clutching a bulging manila folder to her chest, her perfectly styled hair disheveled, mascara smudged beneath her eyes. Professor Williams. Professor Chen. Your thesis advisor, what was his name? Dr. Martinez. Dr. Martinez tried to contact me. My voice came out strangled. Contact you. He wrote me 17 letters. 17. Telling me about your research, some groundbreaking work you were doing. Said you were the most promising student he'd ever advised. She was backing toward the living room now, the folder pressed against her like armor. He wanted to recommend you for some fellowship at MIT. Full funding, research position, the works. The room started spinning. That was 7 years ago, Mom. I never heard about any fellowship. Because I threw the letters away. Just like I threw away the job offers from Google and Apple and that startup in Seattle. Just like I deleted the voicemails from that documentary filmmaker who wanted to interview you about women in tech. Uncle Mike stood up slowly. Patricia, what did you do? I protected this family, she shrieked. Do you know what it's like having everyone constantly tell you how amazing your daughter is while your son, your gentle, kind son, gets overlooked? Derek needed support. He needed to be the special one for once. Derek looked like he'd been slapped. Mom, I never asked you to. You didn't have to ask. I could see how it hurt you when Sarah got all the attention. At graduation, at family dinners, every time someone met you both. It was always, Sarah this, Sarah that, isn't she brilliant? What about my son? What about Derek? I was gripping the edge of the dining table so hard my knuckles had gone white. So you sabotaged me. For 7 years. I saved you from becoming one of those career-obsessed women who end up alone and bitter. Look at you now, you have a good job, a nice fiancé. You should thank me. Thank you. My voice was rising. Thank you for stealing my future. Dr. Martinez was working on autonomous vehicle AI. That fellowship could have put me at the forefront of the entire industry. Aunt Linda was frantically typing on her phone. I'm looking up this Dr. Martinez. Sarah, what university? Stanford Computer Science Department. But it doesn't matter now. Dr. Roberto Martinez, Stanford, she read from her screen. Currently leading Tesla's AI research division. She looked up at me, eyes wide. Sarah, he's your boss's boss. The irony hit me like a physical blow. I'd ended up working adjacent to my stolen opportunity anyway, just 7 years later and without the research foundation that could have changed everything. Grandma Rose was staring at Mom like she'd never seen her before. Patricia, you destroyed your daughter's mail. Federal crime aside, how could you live with yourself? I lived with myself just fine until tonight. Mom clutched the folder tighter. Everyone was happy. Derek had his medical career, Sarah found her own path, the family was together. The family was together because you lied to all of us, Cousin Tom interrupted. You made us think Sarah didn't want to see us. I made sure Derek got the attention he deserved. By stealing mine, I said quietly. Derek was standing in the kitchen doorway, looking shell-shocked. Mom, those monthly payments Sarah's been sending, you told me that money was for your medical bills. You said you had diabetes and couldn't afford insulin. I do have diabetes. No, you don't, Derek said, his voice flat. I'm a doctor, Mom. I've seen your medical records. You're healthier than most 50-year-olds. More lies. Always more lies. Where did the money go? I asked. Mom's grip on the folder was slipping. Papers started sliding out, letters, bank statements, what looked like property documents. The house. I was saving the house. What's wrong with the house? Uncle Mike demanded. The second mortgage. After your father died, I had to take out loans to keep up with Derek's education costs. But then the payments got too high, and I thought if Sarah could just help for a while. Derek sat down heavily. How much do you owe? It's fine. It's manageable. I just need a little more time. A document had fallen from the folder near my feet. I bent to pick it up and felt my world tilt sideways. Mom, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. This is a foreclosure notice. From 6 months ago. The room went deadly silent. Foreclosure. Grandma Rose's voice cracked. Patricia, you're losing the house. Mom lunged for the paper in my hands, but I stepped back, scanning the legal document. The words blurred together, default notice, final demand, sheriff sale, but the numbers were crystal clear. You owe $340,000 in back payments, I read aloud. Final notice of sale dated February 15th, Mom, that's 4 months ago. How are you still living here? I worked it out with the bank, she said frantically. They gave me an extension. Derek was on his feet now, moving toward the scattered papers. What kind of extension? He picked up a bank statement and his face went white. Mom, your account shows a deposit of $50,000 last month. Where did that come from? The silence stretched until Uncle Mike stood up slowly. Patricia, did you take out another loan? I had to. The bank was going to sell the house in March. In whose name? I demanded, though I already suspected the answer. Mom's shoulders sagged. Yours. And Derek's. I needed co-signers, and you both have excellent credit. You forged our signatures, Derek said flatly. I was protecting our family home. The house your father built with his own hands. Would you rather see strangers living here? Aunt Linda was scrolling furiously through her phone. Patrick, I'm calling my lawyer. This is fraud on multiple levels. Don't you dare. Mom shrieked. I raised these children. I sacrificed everything. The least they can do is help me keep the roof over our heads. What roof? I waved the foreclosure notice. You're losing it anyway. All you've done is destroy our credit in the process. Derek had found more papers. Sarah, look at this. She's got loan applications going back 3 years. Different banks, different amounts. All with our information. I grabbed the papers from his hands. Loan application from Wells Fargo for $25,000, approved with my information. Another from Chase for $30,000, Derek's details. A credit line from Bank of America for $40,000, my social security number again. How much? Uncle Mike asked grimly. I did rapid math, cross-referencing dates and amounts. Conservative estimate. She's borrowed at least $200,000 using our identities. That's on top of the original mortgage debt. Jesus Christ, Patricia, Uncle Mike breathed. Don't you take the Lord's name in vain in my house. It's not your house. Aunt Linda snapped. It belongs to the bank, apparently. Grandma Rose was studying one of the papers Derek had handed her. Patricia, this credit application shows Sarah's income as $85,000 per year. You told them she makes a third of what she actually earns. I had to be conservative with the estimates. You committed fraud. Derek's voice carried a fury I'd never heard from him. Mom, do you understand what you've done? We could face criminal charges for loans we never signed for. They can't prove you didn't sign them, Mom said desperately. I stared at her. You really think we're going to cover for you? You're my children. Family protects family. Family doesn't steal from family, Grandma Rose said, her voice ice cold. Family doesn't destroy each other's futures. Cousin Rachel had been quietly examining some of the scattered letters. Patricia. Some of these are postmarked last month. From someone named Jennifer Walsh at Microsoft. My heart stopped. Give me that. Rachel handed me an unopened envelope addressed to me, care of Mom's address. I tore it open with shaking hands. Dear Ms. Chen, I read aloud, I hope this letter reaches you. I've been trying to contact you regarding an opportunity to lead Microsoft's new AI ethics division. Your former professor, Dr. Martinez, highly recommended you for this position. The role offers a $400,000 base salary plus equity, and would involve. I stopped reading, my vision blurring. 400,000. Derek whispered. I looked up at Mom, who was backing toward the stairs. This is dated 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks, Mom. How many other opportunities have you stolen from me? You don't need more money. You're already successful. That's not the point. I was shouting now, all pretense of composure gone. You don't get to decide what I need. You don't get to control my life. I'm your mother. You're a criminal. Derek snapped. Sarah, we have to call the police. No police. Mom's voice was shrill with panic. I'll fix this. I'll call the banks tomorrow, explain everything. Explain what? Uncle Mike stood up, pulling out his phone. How you been running an identity theft operation using your own children? Michael, you put that phone away right now. Or what, Patricia? You'll forge my signature too. That's when I noticed Mom was clutching something else, something she grabbed from the kitchen that I hadn't seen before. A small leather address book, worn at the edges. What's in your hand? I asked. She clutched it tighter. Nothing. It's nothing. Derek moved closer. Mom, what's in the book? Family contacts, she said quickly. Phone numbers, addresses. Nothing important. But her eyes were darting toward the stairs, calculating distance. She was planning to run. I stepped sideways, blocking her path to the staircase. Show us the book, Mom. Sarah, don't. Show us the goddamn book. The profanity hung in the air like a slap. I never swore in front of family. Never raised my voice. But something fundamental had shifted in me tonight. Mom's facade finally cracked completely. You want to see it? Fine. She threw the book at my feet. See how much I've protected you. See how many people I've kept away from my family. I bent down and picked up the book, its pages falling open to reveal dozens of names, phone numbers, and notes in Mom's handwriting. My hands started trembling as I read the entries. Dr. Martinez, blocked. Too pushy about Sarah's potential. Jennifer Walsh, Microsoft, told her Sarah moved to Europe. Google recruiter, said Sarah was pregnant, not interested in career advancement. Marcus Rodriguez, told him Sarah was seeing someone else. Stop calling. My knees gave out. Marcus? I whispered, staring at the entry. She told my fiancé I was seeing someone else. Derek was reading over my shoulder. Sarah, there are dozens of entries here. Recruiters, professors, friends from college. I flipped through the pages with shaking hands. Every page revealed another stolen connection, another sabotaged relationship. My college roommate Jessica, Mom had told her I didn't want to be friends anymore. My mentor from my first job, blocked and told I'd moved companies. Even my high school guidance counselor, who'd apparently tried to reach out about a scholarship reunion event. Dr. Sarah Hendricks, therapist, I read aloud. Note says, told her Sarah was doing fine, didn't need follow-up appointment. Uncle Mike leaned forward. What therapist? After Dad died, I was having panic attacks. Dr. Hendricks said she wanted to see me for a few more sessions, but when I called to schedule, the office said I'd canceled all future appointments. I looked up at Mom, who was pressed against the wall like a cornered animal. You canceled my therapy. You were getting better. You didn't need some stranger filling your head with nonsense about your family. Derek grabbed the book from my hands, scanning the entries. Mom, you've been intercepting Sarah's mail and calls for a decade. This is stalking. This is love. Mom screamed. I was protecting both of you from people who wanted to use you, manipulate you, take you away from your family. By isolating us. I stood up slowly, my legs still unsteady. By making sure we had no support system outside of you. Aunt Linda was typing furiously on her phone. I'm documenting everything. Patricia, this address book alone shows premeditated fraud and harassment going back years. You can't prove I did anything wrong. Grandma Rose's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Patricia, where is Robert's life insurance money? The room went dead silent. What? Mom's face went white. Your husband's life insurance policy. $500,000. Where is that money? Derek and I stared at each other. We'd never heard about any life insurance policy. That's private, Mother. Patricia Elizabeth, you told me that money was put in trust for the children's education. It was. Derek's medical school. Cost $180,000 total, Derek said quietly. I have the receipts. You showed them to me when I offered to help pay you back. Uncle Mike was pulling up something on his phone. Patricia, I helped Robert set up that policy when Derek was born. Northwestern Mutual, $500,000 term life. It should have paid out immediately after his death. My mouth felt dry. Mom, are you saying Dad had life insurance? Of course he did. He was responsible. He wanted to make sure you children were taken care of. Then where's the money? Derek demanded. Mom's eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal. Expenses. The house, your educations, living costs over 6 years. We calculated this already, I interrupted. Derek's education, even inflated, couldn't have cost more than $200,000 total. My education was scholarships. What happened to the other $300,000? There were other things. Your father's medical bills before he died, funeral expenses, taxes. Dad died of a heart attack in the ambulance, Derek said flatly. There were no medical bills. And funeral expenses don't cost $300,000. Uncle Mike was scrolling through his phone. Patricia, I can contact Northwestern Mutual directly. They'll have records of how the payout was distributed. Don't you dare. Then tell us where the money is. Mom looked around the room desperately, seeing no allies, no escape routes. Her perfectly composed mask had completely shattered, revealing something desperate and wild underneath. Fine, she shrieked. You want to know where it went? It went to keeping this family together. It went to making sure Derek had every opportunity. It went to protecting Sarah from making the biggest mistakes of her life. What mistakes? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. Stanford wanted you to graduate early. Did you know that? They had some accelerated program, wanted you to finish in 3 years and go straight to graduate school. You would have been 20 years old, Sarah. 20. What kind of life is that for a young woman? The room started spinning again. They offered me early graduation. Dr. Martinez called personally. Said you were brilliant enough to skip your senior year, start your master's degree immediately. I told him absolutely not. You needed normal college experiences, friends, social development. That wasn't your decision to make, Derek said, his voice hollow. I'm her mother. Of course it was my decision. I was 19, not 9. And look how well it worked out. Mom gestured wildly. You had a normal senior year. You met friends, joined clubs, learned social skills instead of burying yourself in some laboratory. I stared at her, understanding finally crystallizing. You spent Dad's life insurance money to control our lives. I invested it in your futures. How? Uncle Mike demanded. Show U.S. bank statements, investment accounts, something. Mom's silence was answer enough. Grandma Rose stood up slowly, every one of her 87 years visible in her movements. Patricia, you spent your children's inheritance. I used it to give them better lives. You used it to buy yourself 6 years of power over 2 adults who should have been free to make their own choices. The weight of it hit me like a physical blow. Dad had died thinking he'd secured our futures. Instead, Mom had used his final gift to fund a decade-long campaign of manipulation and control. And we were just getting started. Derek's phone was buzzing. He glanced at the screen and his face went pale. It's Marcus, he said quietly, looking at me. You're Marcus. He's been calling me for months. My heart stopped. What? He said he couldn't reach you directly. Asked if I knew why you weren't responding to his texts or calls. Derek's voice was barely above a whisper. Mom, what did you tell him? Mom backed further against the wall. I protected her. Marcus was getting too serious, too fast. Sarah wasn't ready for marriage. You've been intercepting his calls. The room was spinning again. For how long? Since Christmas. He called here looking for you, said you changed your number and he was worried. I told him you needed space to figure out your career priorities. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands. 17 missed calls from Marcus over the past 3 hours. The most recent text was timestamped 20 minutes ago. Sarah, Derek told me where you are. I'm driving down from the city. We need to talk. He's coming here, I said, my voice hollow. Sarah, I can explain everything, Mom said desperately. Marcus doesn't understand what family means. He was trying to isolate you, make you dependent on him instead of us. Stop. The word came out like a gunshot. Just stop talking. Uncle Mike was still scrolling through his phone. Patricia, I found the Northwestern Mutual payout record. Public information since it went through probate court. The full $500,000 was deposited to your personal account on March 15, 2018. Aunt Linda looked up from her own phone. March 2018. Patricia, that's the same month you told me Derek was struggling financially and Sarah was being selfish about helping family. The math was brutal. Dad died in February 2018. Mom got $500,000 in March. By April, she was already spinning stories about our financial situations to manipulate money from relatives. Derek, I said slowly, when did you move back home? June 2018. Right after residency ended. Mom said she was lonely, and with my student loans it made financial sense to save on rent for a while. She used Dad's life insurance money to pay off your loans, didn't she? Derek stared at Mom. Is that true? I helped you start your career debt-free. Most doctors struggle for years. By lying to me about where the money came from. I thought you were sacrificing, taking out loans against the house. And me? I asked, though pieces were already clicking together. The $2,000 monthly payments I've been sending, those aren't going to household expenses. Grandma Rose was examining another bank statement from the scattered papers. Patricia, this shows regular deposits to a savings account in Derek's name. $2,000 every month for 2 years. Derek's face went white. What savings account? The one I set up for your future. Mom said desperately. When you're ready to buy a house, get married, start a family. You've been taking Sarah's money and saving it for me. Derek looked like he was going to be sick. Without telling either of us. I was planning to tell you both when the time was right. When? I demanded. When Derek gets married. When I'm too old to care about the stolen money. Cousin Tom had been quietly adding numbers on his phone calculator. So let me understand this. Patricia took $500,000 in life insurance money, used some of it to pay Derek's loans without telling him where it came from, then convinced Sarah to send monthly payments that she's been secretly saving in Derek's name. Plus the fraudulent loans in both our names, I added. Don't forget those. This is financial abuse, Aunt Linda said bluntly. Textbook manipulation and exploitation. Grandma Rose was reading something else from the scattered papers. Patricia, what is this letter from a private investigator? My blood went cold. What private investigator? Mom lunged for the paper, but Grandma Rose held it out of reach with surprising agility. It's dated last month. Someone named James Mitchell. Patricia, did you hire a private investigator to follow your children? I needed to know Sarah was safe in that city. Living with a man, no proper supervision. You had me followed. My voice came out as a croak. Derek snatched the letter from Grandma Rose and read quickly. This guy was watching Sarah's apartment building, taking photos, tracking her daily routine. He looked up at me, horrified. Sarah, she knows about the engagement party you're planning for next month. How could she possibly? Then it hit me. The vendor calls. Mom, the caterer called asking about dietary restrictions for the Chen Rodriguez celebration. I thought it was a wrong number. I had every right to know about my daughter's engagement party. It's not your party. You weren't even invited. Uncle Mike stood up abruptly. Patricia, hiring someone to stalk your adult daughter is illegal. Period. It's not stalking. It's parental concern. She's 28 years old. Car headlights swept across the front windows. A door slammed outside, followed by hurried footsteps on the front porch. That'll be Marcus, Derek said quietly. The doorbell rang, followed immediately by urgent knocking. Sarah. Marcus's voice carried through the front door. Sarah, are you okay? Derek said there was some kind of family emergency. I looked around the dining room, papers scattered everywhere, Mom pressed against the wall looking wild-eyed, 23 family members staring at the wreckage of our family's lives. Let him in, I said. Absolutely not, Mom snapped. This is family business. He is family. Or he will be, despite your best efforts to sabotage us. Derek was already moving toward the front door. I heard him explaining something in low, urgent tones, then footsteps approaching the dining room. Marcus appeared in the doorway, took one look at the scene, and his expression shifted from confusion to understanding to fury in about 3 seconds. "Mrs. Chen," he said, his voice deadly calm. "I think you and I need to have a conversation." Marcus stepped into the dining room, and I watched my mother's face cycle through emotions I'd never seen before: panic, calculation, and something that looked almost like relief. "Marcus, sweetheart," she said, her voice instantly shifting to that saccharine tone I knew so well. "What a wonderful surprise. Sarah didn't tell us you were coming." "That's because Sarah didn't know I was coming," Marcus replied evenly, his surgeon's composure intact despite the obvious chaos. "Since apparently all my attempts to reach her have been redirected." He pulled out his phone and started scrolling. "Mrs. Chen, I have 47 missed calls to this house over the past 6 months. Every time I called, you told me Sarah was busy, or sick, or out of town. You said she'd call me back. I always gave her the messages. Did you?" Marcus looked directly at me. "Sarah, did you know I called asking about Thanksgiving dinner? I wanted to bring dessert for the family." My stomach dropped. "What Thanksgiving dinner?" "The one your mother told me was cancelled because you had food poisoning. She said you were too embarrassed to tell me yourself because you didn't want me to see you sick." Derek was staring at Mom with growing horror. "We had Thanksgiving dinner. Just the 3 of us. You said Sarah was too busy with work to come home." "She was busy," Mom said desperately. "The Tesla project was at a critical phase. I took 4 days off specifically to come home," I interrupted. "I called 3 times to confirm. You said Derek was working hospital shifts and couldn't make it." Marcus was still scrolling through his phone. "Mrs. Chen, what about Christmas? You told me Sarah was visiting college friends in Boston. But Sarah told me she was staying home with family." The silence stretched until Aunt Linda spoke up. "Patricia, where was Sarah during Christmas?" She chose to work. Some people care more about their careers than family." "I worked Christmas Day because you told me Derek was covering emergency shifts and couldn't celebrate until the weekend," I said, my voice flat. "But when I called that Saturday, you said he'd come down with the flu." Derek's hands were clenched into fists. "I was here both days. We ordered Chinese takeout and watched movies. Mom kept saying how sad it was that you'd chosen work over family time." Marcus moved closer to me, his jaw tight with controlled anger. "Sarah, the engagement party vendors, they've been calling your mother's house for weeks. She's been answering as your party planning assistant and making decisions about our celebration." "What kind of decisions?" Uncle Mike asked. "She changed the venue from the restaurant Sarah picked to some community center in Modesto. Switched the menu from the fusion cuisine we wanted to traditional American fare. And..." Marcus paused, looking at Mom with disgust. "She told the photographer we wanted minimal couple photos because Sarah was self-conscious about her weight." I felt like I'd been slapped. "I never said that. I've never been self-conscious about, why would you even tell them that?" Mom's back was literally against the wall now. "I was trying to help. That photographer was expensive, and the restaurant you picked was too trendy. I found better options." "You sabotaged our engagement party," Marcus said, his voice cutting. "You've been intercepting vendor calls for 3 weeks, making changes to our celebration without telling either of us." Grandma Rose was reading another paper from the floor. "Marcus, dear, did you send Sarah flowers on Valentine's Day?" "Roses. 2 dozen white roses delivered to her office." "Why?" "Because there's a florist receipt here showing Patricia purchased 2 dozen white roses on February 14th, same day, same quantity." My blood went cold. "The flowers at work, those were from you?" "With a note about how much I love you and how excited I am for our future together." "I never got a note. The delivery person said they were from someone who admires your work." I looked at Mom, who was now visibly shaking. "You intercepted Marcus's flowers and had them delivered without his note." "The note was too personal for a workplace delivery. It was my workplace. My flowers. My relationship." Derek had moved to the window and was looking out at the driveway. "Marcus, what kind of car do you drive?" "Tesla Model S." "Why?" "Mom," Derek said slowly, "you told me Sarah's boyfriend drove a beat-up Honda Civic and couldn't afford insurance." Marcus actually laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I drive a Tesla because Sarah gets an employee discount. We bought it together last spring." "You bought a car together?" Cousin Rachel looked shocked. "We've been living together for 2 years," Marcus said. "We have a joint savings account, shared mortgage on Sarah's condo, the works." "Mrs. Chen, what exactly did you tell your family about our relationship?" Mom opened and closed her mouth several times before Uncle Mike answered for her. "She said Sarah was supporting a deadbeat boyfriend with drug problems." Marcus went very still. As a pediatric surgeon, I knew he'd had extensive background checks, drug screenings, psychological evaluations. The accusation wasn't just insulting, it was professionally dangerous. "Drug problems," he repeated quietly. "I was protecting Sarah's reputation," Mom said frantically. "People talk, and if the family thought. You told them I was a drug addict." Marcus's voice was getting dangerously calm. "Mrs. Chen, I perform surgery on children. I save lives for a living. And you told your family I was a drug addict." Derek stepped between them. "Marcus, she's been lying about everything. This isn't about you specifically. Isn't it?" Marcus pulled out his phone and started reading. "Because I've been documenting these conversations for months. February 12th, Mrs. Chen told me Sarah was reconsidering the relationship and needed space. March 3rd, she said Sarah was focusing on career advancement and didn't want distractions. March 18th, she told me Sarah was exploring other options romantically." "Other options?" I whispered. "She said you'd reconnected with an old college boyfriend. Someone named David from your Stanford days who understood your academic background better than I could." "There is no David. I barely dated anyone in college." Marcus's composure finally cracked slightly. "Sarah, I've been planning to propose for months. I bought the ring in January. But every time I tried to have a serious conversation about our future, your mother would call with some emergency that needed your immediate attention. What emergencies? Derek's medical bills. House repairs. Your mother's heart palpitations that required family support. Marcus looked directly at Derek. How's your health, Dr. Chen? Any expensive medical crises recently? I'm perfectly healthy. And I've been covering my own expenses since residency ended. Mom made us sound like a trapped animal. I was protecting this family. Marcus, you don't understand the pressure Sarah's under, the expectations. I understand that you've been systematically isolating your daughter from everyone who cares about her, Marcus shot back. I understand that you've been lying to me for 6 months about her feelings and availability. And I understand that you've been stealing from her while manipulating her emotions. He turned to address the entire room. Has everyone here heard about the financial fraud? Because that's just the beginning. Mrs. Chen has been running a psychological warfare campaign against her own children. Aunt Linda was taking notes on her phone. Marcus, would you be willing to document your interactions with Patricia for legal purposes? Absolutely. I keep detailed records of all my calls and conversations. Marcus looked at me, his expression softening slightly. Sarah, there's something else you need to know. My heart sank. What now? Your mother called my hospital 2 weeks ago. She told them she was your emergency contact and that you'd been in an accident. She said I was just a friend and shouldn't be notified if anything happened to you. The room went dead silent. She tried to have me removed as your emergency contact, Marcus continued. It's only because I had legal documentation of our relationship that they didn't change your records. Derek looked like he was going to be sick. Mom, you called his workplace. Emergency contacts should be family members, not temporary boyfriends. We're engaged. I screamed. We've been together for 4 years. We're buying a house together. You're buying a house. Grandma Rose looked stunned. Marcus nodded. We close. The weight of Marcus's words hung in the air like smoke. For years together, a house purchase, emergency contact fraud, each revelation felt like another brick added to the crushing wall of my mother's deceptions. We close escrow next Friday, Marcus continued, his voice steady despite the chaos around us. Sarah put down $180,000 from her savings. We've been planning to tell the family after the paperwork was finalized. Uncle Mike whistled low. $180,000 down payment. Patricia, I thought you said Sarah was living paycheck to paycheck. She was exaggerating her savings to impress Marcus, Mom said weakly, but even she seemed to know how hollow it sounded. Derek had gone very quiet, staring at the scattered papers on the floor. Sarah, he said slowly, if you've got that kind of money saved up, and you've been sending Mom $2,000 a month for 2 years, what's your actual financial situation? I did quick math in my head, factoring in my Tesla salary, bonuses, and stock options. After the house purchase, I'll still have about $400,000 in investments and savings. The silence that followed was deafening. Cousin Tom broke it first. $400,000. Patricia, you told us Sarah was struggling so much she couldn't contribute to Grandma's birthday gift last year. That stung. I'd wondered why I hadn't been included in the family gift planning for Grandma's 86th birthday. What gift? Nobody asked me to contribute to anything. Aunt Linda was scrolling through her phone. Patricia organized the whole thing. Said Sarah was too proud to admit she couldn't afford the $200 contribution for the cruise gift certificate. $200. Marcus looked incredulous. Sarah, didn't you just donate $15,000 to the Children's Hospital charity auction last month? $15,000. Grandma Rose's voice was sharp. Sarah, you donated that much money. It was for the pediatric surgery wing. Marcus and I both believe in giving back, and Patricia told us you were so financially irresponsible that she was considering taking over your credit cards, Uncle Mike interrupted. Mom was backing toward the kitchen again, but Derek moved to block her path. No more running, Mom. We're going to finish this conversation. There's nothing left to discuss, she snapped, but her voice was getting shrill again. You want to air all our private business in front of everyone? Fine. But don't come crying to me when you realize what you've thrown away. What we've thrown away. I couldn't hide the incredulity in my voice. Mom, you've stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars, destroyed professional opportunities, sabotaged my relationship, and isolated me from my entire family. What exactly are we supposed to be grateful for? A roof over your head. Food on the table. College education. You didn't pay for my college education, I said flatly. I had academic scholarships and worked 3 jobs. You've been taking credit for my achievements while simultaneously undermining them. Marcus was reading something on his phone, his expression growing darker. Mrs. Chen, I just got an email from our real estate agent. She says you called yesterday asking about postponing the closing because Sarah was having second thoughts about homeownership. My vision actually blurred with rage. You tried to sabotage our house purchase. I was protecting you from making a mistake. You're too young to tie yourself down with that kind of debt. I'm 28 years old. I make $250,000 a year. When exactly will I be old enough to make my own decisions? Derek was reading over Marcus's shoulder. The agent says Mom claimed to be Sarah's financial advisor and had concerns about the purchase price. Financial advisor? Aunt Linda looked at Mom like she'd grown a second head. Patricia, you worked part-time at a gift shop before Robert died. What financial credentials do you have? I've been managing this household for 30 years. Into foreclosure, Uncle Mike pointed out grimly. You've managed it straight into foreclosure while stealing from your children. Grandma Rose had been uncharacteristically quiet, but now she stood up with a decisiveness that commanded attention. Patricia, I want you to call Northwestern Mutual tomorrow morning. Mother, I don't see why. You're going to request detailed records of how Robert's life insurance money was spent. Every penny. And you're going to share those records with Sarah and Derek. That's private financial information. It's their money. Grandma Rose's voice carried an authority I'd never heard from her before. That money was meant for their futures, not your control games. Marcus had moved closer to me, his presence steady and reassuring. Sarah, there's one more thing. The private investigator your mother hired. He contacted me directly last week. My blood went cold. He what? Said he was conducting a character assessment for a potential employer. Asked about your personal habits, relationship stability, financial responsibility. I told him whoever hired him could contact your references through proper channels. Derek looked stunned. Mom, you had a private investigator question Sarah's fiancé. I needed to know if Marcus was trustworthy. By having him investigated like a criminal. Marcus's professional calm was finally cracking. Mrs. Chen, I've had federal background checks for my medical license. I've been vetted by hospital boards, insurance companies, and medical review panels. But you hired some random private investigator to dig up dirt on me? I found the investigator's report, Cousin Tom said quietly, holding up a manila folder that had been partially hidden under the dining table. Patricia, this is incredibly detailed. Financial records, work schedules, even photos of Marcus leaving his apartment. My hands were shaking again. Photos? Tom flipped through the pages. Looks like this guy followed him for weeks. There's a whole section about his daily routines and potential character flaws. He paused, reading. Mrs. Chen, you paid this man $3,500 to stalk your daughter's boyfriend. $3,500. Derek's voice cracked. Mom, you don't have $3,500. The foreclosure notices prove that. I borrowed it, Mom said defensively. From who? Uncle Mike demanded. The credit line. Sarah's credit line. The room started spinning again. You used my stolen credit line to pay someone to investigate my fiancé. I was protecting you. You were violating me. The words came out louder than I intended, but I didn't care anymore. You stole my identity, ruined my credit, sabotaged my career, isolated me from my family, and then used my own stolen money to have the man I love followed and investigated. Marcus put his arm around my shoulders, and I realized I was trembling. Sarah, we need to call the police. Tonight. No police. Mom shrieked, but Uncle Mike was already pulling out his phone. Patricia, this has gone way beyond family drama. Identity theft, fraud, stalking, these are serious crimes. Michael, you call the police and I'll tell them about the money you borrowed from Robert's shop fund in 2003. Uncle Mike paused, then laughed grimly. The $500 I borrowed to fix my car. That I paid back with interest 6 months later. Go ahead, Patricia. I'm sure they'll be fascinated by that compared to your $250,000 fraud operation. Mom's last desperate threat had failed. She looked around the room, seeing nothing but disgusted faces and disappointed family members. Her perfectly maintained facade had crumbled completely, revealing something desperate and ugly underneath. But I wasn't finished yet. There was still one more revelation waiting, and I could see it in Derek's expression as he continued reading the private investigator's report. Whatever he'd found was about to change everything. Derek's face had gone completely white as he continued reading the investigator's report. His hands were actually shaking as he turned the pages. Sarah, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. There's a section here about you. About your daily routine, your work schedule. He paused, swallowing hard. Your medical appointments. My stomach dropped. What medical appointments? It says here you've been seeing Dr. Patricia Hendricks twice a month for the past year. List specific dates, times you entered and left her office. Derek looked up at me, confused. But Mom said you canceled therapy years ago. The room went dead silent. I felt Marcus's arm tighten around my shoulders. I have been seeing Dr. Hendricks, I said slowly. But I never canceled therapy after Dad died. I started going back last year when my anxiety got worse. Mom, how did you know about my current therapy appointments? Mom's face cycled through several expressions before settling on defensive anger. I don't know what you're talking about. Derek kept reading. The investigator has photos of you leaving Dr. Hendricks' office. Dates going back 10 months. He looked up, horrified. Mom, you've been having Sarah followed for almost a year. That's not, I only hired him last month. The report is dated in sections, Marcus said, taking the folder from Derek. Mrs. Chen, the earliest surveillance photos are from January of last year. You've been paying someone to stalk your daughter for over a year. Uncle Mike was scrolling through his phone. A year of private investigator fees? Patricia, we're talking about tens of thousands of dollars. Where did that money come from? Various sources, Mom said weakly. Aunt Linda stood up abruptly. Patricia, I lent you $12,000 last spring because you said Derek needed emergency surgery. You used my money to have Sarah stalked. Derek's face went ashen. What emergency surgery? I've never had surgery. Your appendix, Mom said frantically. You don't remember. You were in so much pain. Mom, I have my appendix. I'm a doctor. I think I remember having it removed. The lies were unraveling so fast I could barely keep track. But Marcus was still reading the investigator's report, and his expression was getting darker by the page. Mrs. Chen, he said, his voice deadly calm, this report includes surveillance of Sarah's therapy sessions, but it also has detailed observations about her emotional state and psychological stability. My blood turned to ice. What kind of observations? Marcus read directly from the report, subject appears to suffer from anxiety and depression. Frequently observed crying after therapy sessions. May be emotionally unstable and unsuitable for long-term relationship commitment. You had someone watch me cry. My voice came out strangled. You paid someone to document my most vulnerable moments. I was concerned about your mental health. You sabotaged my mental health. I was shouting now, all pretense of composure gone. You canceled my therapy after Dad died, then spent a year having me secretly watched when I finally got help again. Grandma Rose had moved to look over Marcus's shoulder at the report. Patricia, this investigator was making recommendations about Sarah's fitness for marriage based on observing her leaving therapy sessions. Mental health is important in a long-term partnership, Mom said desperately. So is honesty, Derek snapped. Sarah, did you know Mom has been asking me about your stability for months? She kept hinting that you might be having some kind of breakdown. I've been going to therapy to deal with family trauma, I said, looking directly at Mom. Dr. Hendricks has been helping me understand why I have panic attacks every time someone raises their voice. Why I second-guess every decision I make. Why I feel like nothing I do is ever good enough. Marcus was still reading. There's more. The investigator was instructed to look for evidence of risky behavior, including alcohol abuse, financial irresponsibility, and relationship infidelity. You had me investigated for cheating. I could barely form the words. I needed to know if you were trustworthy. I'm not trustworthy. I gestured wildly at the papers scattered across the dining room. You've committed multiple felonies, but I'm the one who can't be trusted. Uncle Tom had been quietly adding numbers on his phone calculator. Patricia, based on what we've heard tonight, you've stolen or fraudulently obtained over $300,000. Plus investigator fees, plus whatever you actually did with Robert's life insurance money. We're talking about $250,000 in theft, minimum. It's not theft when it's family. It's absolutely theft, Marcus interrupted. Mrs. Chen, Sarah's been contributing to what she thought was family support while you diverted that money to pay for having her stalked and investigated. You used her own money to violate her privacy. Derek was staring at another page of the report. Sarah, there's a whole section here about your work performance. The investigator somehow got information about your projects at Tesla, your salary, your stock options. How? I demanded. That information is confidential. Mom's silence was answer enough. Aunt Linda's face had gone pale. Patricia, did you impersonate Sarah to get information from her employer? I made some inquiries as her emergency contact. You're not my emergency contact. I screamed. Marcus is. You tried to change that illegally, remember? The scope of it was overwhelming. Identity theft, fraud, stalking, impersonation, privacy violations, and we'd only been scratching the surface for 2 hours. But Derek was turning to the last page of the investigator's report, and his expression suggested we hadn't hit bottom yet. Sarah, he said quietly, there's a recommendation section here. About what your mother should do with the information. Marcus took the folder from him and read silently for a moment, his jaw getting tighter with each line. What does it say? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Marcus looked up at me, then at Mom, his expression filled with disgust. Mrs. Chen, you paid someone to create a plan for breaking up your daughter's engagement. Marcus's words hit the room like a bomb. The investigator's report trembled in his hands as he continued reading the final section aloud. The subject's emotional instability, combined with her family's financial dependence on her income, creates an opportunity to demonstrate that marriage would be detrimental to both parties. Recommend gradual escalation of family crises requiring subject's attention and financial support, thereby creating stress in the romantic relationship. My legs gave out. I sank into the nearest chair, staring at my mother in complete disbelief. You had someone write you a manual for destroying my engagement. It's not like that, Mom said desperately. I was protecting you from making a mistake. By following a written plan to sabotage my happiness. Marcus was still reading, his voice getting colder. Mrs. Chen, this report recommends specific tactics. Creating fake medical emergencies. Scheduling family obligations during important relationship milestones. Even suggests ways to make Sarah doubt Marcus's commitment by implying he's not family-oriented enough. Derek grabbed the report from Marcus. It says here that Sarah's excessive loyalty to family can be exploited to create conflict with romantic partners. He looked up at Mom, horrified. You've been manipulating Sarah's love for us as a weapon against her relationship. The investigation showed that Sarah prioritizes family over everything else, Mom said frantically. That's not healthy in a marriage. Because you trained me to. I shot back. You spent 28 years convincing me that family always comes first, that questioning family decisions was selfish, that disappointing you was the worst thing I could do. Uncle Mike was reading over Derek's shoulder. Patricia, this thing is like a psychological warfare manual. It actually maps out Sarah's emotional triggers and how to use them. What triggers? Aunt Linda asked grimly. Derek's voice was hollow as he read, subject shows extreme distress when family members express disappointment in her choices. Responds immediately to claims of family financial hardship. Guilt over father's death can be leveraged to increase compliance with family demands. The room went deadly silent. Even Grandma Rose, who remained composed through everything else, looked physically ill. You've been using Dad's death to manipulate me. My voice came out as a whisper. For 6 years. Mom's back was against the wall again, literally and figuratively. Sarah, you don't understand the pressure I was under. After your father died, keeping this family together was everything. By tearing me apart. I stood up slowly, my hands clenched into fists. Every time you mentioned how disappointed Dad would be in my choices, every time you said his death was harder because I wasn't around enough to help, you were following a written script. Marcus had found something else in the report. Mrs. Chen, there's a timeline here. It shows specific interventions you've implemented over the past 8 months. The fake medical bills Derek supposedly had. That was February, right after Sarah and I started talking about setting a wedding date. Derek was scanning his own copy. The house renovation emergency that required immediate funds. March, right after Easter when Marcus met some of the extended family for the first time. And the sudden diabetes medication costs that couldn't wait. I asked, pieces clicking together. That was 2 weeks after Marcus and I put the offer on our house. Mom's composure finally shattered completely. You don't understand. Everyone was always talking about wonderful Sarah, brilliant Sarah, successful Sarah. What about Derek? What about me? I sacrificed everything for you children, and all I ever heard was praise for Sarah's achievements. So you decided to destroy them? Grandma Rose's voice cut like ice. Patricia, you've spent more money sabotaging your daughter's life than most people make in 5 years. Cousin Rachel had been quietly calculating on her phone. Between the stolen loans, the investigator fees, and the fraudulent family emergency fund, we're looking at close to $400,000 in theft and fraud. Patricia, this isn't family drama anymore. This is organized crime. It's not crime when it's your own family. Yes, it is, Marcus interrupted. Mrs. Chen, identity theft is a federal offense whether the victim is a stranger or your daughter. Hiring someone to stalk and investigate private citizens is illegal. Using fraudulent information to manipulate financial institutions is bank fraud. Uncle Mike was typing rapidly on his phone. I'm documenting everything for the police report. Patricia, you're going to face serious criminal charges. Michael, you can't be serious. I'm completely serious. You've stolen money from half the people in this room using elaborate lies about your children's situations. You've committed fraud on a massive scale. Derek was still reading the investigator's recommendations, his face getting paler. Sarah, there's a section here about long-term family preservation strategies. Mom, you were planning to do this indefinitely. What do you mean? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. The report suggests that even if your current relationship ends, similar tactics should be used against future romantic partners to ensure Sarah remains appropriately focused on family obligations. The implications hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just about Marcus. Mom had been planning to sabotage any relationship I ever had, for the rest of my life. You were never going to let me go, I said, understanding finally crystallizing. No matter who I met, no matter how happy I was, you were going to destroy it to keep me under control. Mom's silence was confirmation enough. But Marcus was turning to what appeared to be an appendix in the report, and his expression suggested we still hadn't reached the bottom of this nightmare. Mrs. Chen, he said, his voice deadly quiet, what's this section about Sarah's medical vulnerabilities? Marcus's question hung in the air like a death sentence. I watched my mother's face cycle through panic, calculation, and something that looked almost like resignation. Medical vulnerabilities? Derek asked, moving closer to read over Marcus's shoulder. What does that mean? Marcus was scanning the page, his expression growing darker with each line. It's a detailed analysis of Sarah's anxiety medication, therapy schedule, and... He paused, looking up at Mom with pure disgust. Mrs. Chen, you gave the investigator access to Sarah's medical records. My vision started tunneling. That's impossible. Those records are protected by federal privacy laws. Not if someone with emergency contact privileges requests them, Marcus said grimly. Mrs. Chen, did you use your fraudulent emergency contact status to obtain Sarah's confidential medical information? Mom's silence was answer enough. Derek grabbed the report from Marcus, reading frantically. Sarah, this has details about your anxiety medication dosages, your therapy session notes, even your discussions about our family dynamics with Dr. Hendricks. My therapy sessions are confidential, I whispered, feeling violated in a way I couldn't even articulate. Mom, you illegally accessed my private medical information. I needed to understand what that therapist was putting in your head. She was helping me heal from the trauma you caused. I was screaming now, beyond caring who heard me. Dar. Hendricks has been helping me understand that panic attacks aren't normal, that walking on eggshells around family isn't healthy, that your behavior has been abusive. Aunt Linda was reading another section of the report. Patricia, this investigator made specific recommendations about Sarah's medication. He suggests that increased family stress could worsen her anxiety and potentially make her more dependent on family support. The room went dead silent as the implications sank in. You've been deliberately triggering my anxiety attacks, I said, the pieces finally clicking together. Every fake emergency, every guilt trip about Dad, every time you created chaos right before an important event in my life, you were following professional recommendations on how to weaponize my mental health condition. Marcus was still reading, his hands shaking with rage. Mrs. Chen, this report actually includes a timeline correlating Sarah's therapy appointments with optimal intervention opportunities. You've been timing your fake crises to coincide with her therapy sessions. Derek looked like he was going to be sick. Mom, Sarah's been getting better this past year. Her anxiety attacks were less frequent, she seemed more confident, more independent. Because therapy was working, I said, understanding flooding through me. And you've been actively sabotaging my recovery. Grandma Rose stood up with visible effort, her 87 years weighing heavily on her small frame. Patricia, you paid someone to help you psychologically torture your own daughter. I was protecting this family. You were destroying it. Uncle Mike roared. Patricia, you've been running a systematic campaign of abuse against your own child. Marcus had found something else in the medical section. Mrs. Chen, there's a notation here about Sarah's emergency contact information being changed at her doctor's office 3 months ago. Did you impersonate her to update her medical records? Emergency contacts should be family members, Mom said weakly. You removed Marcus as her emergency contact and listed yourself instead, Derek said, reading over Marcus's shoulder. Then you used that fraudulent access to obtain her private medical information and share it with a private investigator. Cousin Tom was frantically typing on his phone. This is beyond identity theft now. Patricia, accessing someone's medical records under false pretenses is a federal crime. Using that information to harm them psychologically could be prosecuted as assault. I never hurt Sarah. You hired someone to create a psychological profile designed to exploit her mental health vulnerabilities. Marcus's professional composure had completely shattered. Mrs. Chen, as a medical professional, I can tell you that what you've done constitutes deliberate psychological abuse. You've been systematically undermining your daughter's mental health treatment. Aunt Linda was staring at another page of the report. Patricia, there's a section here about escalation strategies if the current approach fails to break up Sarah's engagement. What were you planning to do if the fake emergencies and guilt trips didn't work? Mom's face went gray. She opened her mouth several times but no words came out. Derek took the report from Aunt Linda and read silently for a moment. When he looked up, his expression was one of absolute horror. Sarah, he said quietly, you need to read this. And then we need to call the police. Tonight. Whatever was in that final section, Derek's reaction told me we'd finally reached the bottom of my mother's depravity. And somehow, I knew the worst revelation was still coming. I took the report from Derek with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The final section was titled, Contingency Protocols, and as I read the first paragraph, my legs gave out completely. If subject proceeds with marriage despite intervention efforts, recommend immediate escalation to preserve family unit integrity. Subject's professional reputation and security clearance eligibility represent significant leverage points. Marcus was reading over my shoulder, his breath sharp against my ear. Security clearance. Sarah, what security clearance? Tesla has government contracts, I said numbly. The DoD autonomous vehicle project. I had to get clearance last year for the military applications work. Derek grabbed another page from the scattered papers. Mom, there's a letter here from someone at the Department of Defense. It's addressed to you, not Sarah. My blood turned to ice. Give me that. The letter was dated 3 weeks ago, written on official DoD letterhead. As I read it, the room started spinning around me. Dear Mrs. Chen, I read aloud, my voice barely above a whisper, thank you for bringing your concerns about Ms. Sarah Chen's psychological fitness to our attention. We take all reports regarding security clearance holders seriously and will be conducting a review of her continued eligibility for classified projects. The silence that followed was deafening. You reported me to the Department of Defense? My voice cracked on the last word. You tried to have my security clearance revoked. I was worried about your mental stability, Mom said desperately. The therapy, the anxiety medication, the way you've been pulling away from family. You told the federal government I was psychologically unfit for my job. I was hyperventilating now, the implications crashing over me like waves. Mom, if I lose my clearance, I lose my position at Tesla. The entire autonomous vehicle project depends on that clearance. Marcus had gone very still beside me. Mrs. Chen, what exactly did you tell the DoD about Sarah's mental health? Another paper fluttered to the floor from Mom's trembling hands. Derek snatched it up before she could stop him. It's a copy of her report to the government, Derek said, his voice hollow. Mom sent them the private investigator's psychological assessment, plus what she claimed were concerning excerpts from Sarah's therapy sessions. Uncle Mike stood up abruptly. Patricia, you sent illegally obtained medical records to the federal government? I sent my concerns as a family member about Sarah's fitness for sensitive work. You fabricated evidence to destroy her career. Marcus roared. Mrs. Chen, security clearance investigations can take months. Even if Sarah is eventually cleared, the review process alone could cost her the promotion she's been working toward for 3 years. Aunt Linda was reading the DoD letter more carefully. Patricia, this says they're also investigating Sarah's financial irregularities and possible compromise vulnerabilities. What financial irregularities? Mom's silence stretched until I understood with sick certainty what she'd done. The loans, I said, my voice flat. You reported the fraudulent loans you took out in my name as evidence that I'm financially compromised. Derek was staring at Mom like he'd never seen her before. You framed Sarah for your own crimes. I told them about the irregular financial patterns in her accounts. Irregular patterns that you created. I was screaming again, but I couldn't stop myself. You stole my identity to take out loans, then reported those same loans to the government as evidence that I'm a security risk. Grandma Rose was gripping the edge of the dining table, her knuckles white. Patricia, you've destroyed your daughter's career to prevent her from getting married? The marriage would have ruined everything. Sarah belongs with her family, not running off with some man who doesn't understand our bond. What bond? I shot back. You've been systematically destroying my life for years. What part of that suggests a healthy family bond? Marcus was scanning the investigator's report again. Mrs. Chen, there's a timeline here showing you've been planning this DoD complaint for 6 months. You've been building a case against Sarah since before we even got engaged. The scope of the betrayal was breathtaking. Not content with financial fraud and psychological manipulation, Mom had escalated to sabotaging my career with the federal government. But Cousin Rachel was holding up her phone, and her expression suggested our nightmare was about to get even worse. Patricia, she said quietly, I just got a call from my neighbor. She works in HR at Mercy General Hospital. Rachel's face was pale as she looked at Derek. They received an anonymous tip this week about a doctor whose family has serious financial and psychological issues that might affect his fitness to treat patients. Derek went white. What? She's been destroying both of us, I whispered, finally understanding the full scope of my mother's plan. The final piece of Mom's destruction hit Derek like a physical blow. He sank into a chair, his face ashen as the implications crashed over him. Anonymous tip about my fitness to treat patients, he repeated hollowly. Mom, you tried to destroy my medical career too. Rachel nodded grimly. The complaint alleged that Dr. Derek Chen has been involved in fraudulent financial schemes with family members and may be psychologically compromised due to enabling a mentally unstable sister. I stared at my mother, finally seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time in my life. You were willing to destroy both our careers. Everything we'd worked for, everything Dad would have been proud of, you'd burn it all down rather than let us be independent. I was keeping this family together. Mom shrieked, but her voice was getting desperate, unhinged. Without family, you have nothing. Nothing. Marcus stepped forward, his phone already in his hand. Mrs. Chen, I'm calling the police now. Identity theft, fraud, stalking, filing false reports with federal agencies, you're looking at serious federal charges. You can't. I'm their mother. And I'm a mandated reporter, Marcus replied coldly. When I see systematic abuse, I'm legally required to report it. Uncle Mike was gathering the scattered papers into neat piles. Patricia, I'm also calling my lawyer first thing Monday morning. You owe me $15,000, and I want documentation for the district attorney's office. Same here, Aunt Linda added. Patricia, we trusted you. We gave you money because we thought Sarah was struggling and Derek needed help. You stole from all of us. Derek stood up slowly, his composure returning as his medical training kicked in. Mom, Sarah, and I are going to contest every fraudulent loan, report every illegal use of our information, and cooperate fully with any criminal investigation. You need a lawyer. A good one. Derek, please. No. His voice was firm, final. Mom, I love you, but what you've done is unforgivable. Sarah could lose her security clearance because of your lies. I could face medical board review because of your false reports. You've weaponized our love for family against us. I pulled out my phone, my hands steadier now than they'd been all evening. I'm calling Dr. Martinez first. Then the security office at Tesla to report the fraudulent DoD complaint. Then the police. Sarah, wait. I looked at my mother, really looked at her. This woman who'd spent 28 years telling me I was never good enough, never quite right, never her favorite. Who'd stolen my opportunities, sabotaged my relationships, and tried to destroy everything I built. You looked me dead in the eye tonight and said I was never your favorite, I said quietly. You know what, Mom? Good. Because if this is how you treat someone you love, I'd rather be the disappointment. Marcus moved to stand beside me, solid and supportive. Derek stepped up on my other side. Around the room, my aunts and uncles and cousins, family I'd been systematically isolated from, watched with expressions of support and determination. You're wrong about one thing, Mom, I continued, feeling strength I'd never known I possessed. Without family, I don't have nothing. I have everything. I have Marcus, who's loved me honestly for 4 years. I have Derek, who's been as much a victim as I have. I have a career I built myself, a home I earned myself, and a future I'm going to choose myself. I speed-dialed Dr. Martinez's number, holding Mom's gaze as it rang. Sarah. His familiar voice was warm, concerned. I got the strangest call from Microsoft. They said you'd moved to Europe. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. Hi, Dr. Martinez. I have quite a story to tell you. And I think that DoD complaint you probably heard about is going to make a lot more sense in about 10 minutes. As I began explaining everything to my former professor, I watched my mother sink into a chair, finally understanding that her carefully constructed web of lies and manipulation had collapsed completely. For the first time in 28 years, I was free. And despite everything she put me through, despite all the pain and theft and betrayal, I realized something that surprised me. I felt sorry for her. Because while I was walking toward a future filled with love, success, and genuine family connections, she was facing the consequences of choosing control over love, manipulation over trust. She'd never been my favorite either. But unlike her, I was finally okay with that.